Welcome back. Remember, we're coming live this evening. Hashtag MyOpinion, the show where your opinion matters. Send us your tweets using the handle @190ed, or you can post on our Facebook page @DSTV190. And the hashtag that trends this evening is hashtag MyOpinion. The number to dial, 083-913-0001. Standard rates apply. Free minutes do not apply. We are joined now in studio by Yochi Ress, a psychologist who sings. Welcome to hashtag MyOpinion.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Well, you've heard. I mean, these elements that we touched on are elements that are real. I mean, when we're speaking of an emerging market democracy, people in the world would like us to tick these boxes. The mood of the people. Are we optimistic? Do we feel like leadership is doing the right thing? All those. Do we tick the right boxes?
Right. So, I mean, there's definitely a sense that there's a strong negativity, hopelessness that's really brewing in the country, and we're seeing more and more people. You know, we kind of wonder sometimes, where's the Rainbow Nation? Where's that kind of energy, that color, that hope? And I guess the question is, from a psychological point of view, you know, what's going on here, and how did we get here? And what are the effects of where we are in, and the processes that have led us into this place, and how do we get out of it?
From a psychological point of view, what brings about social harmony?
Yeah, so it's really, you know, what I think would be really a valuable perspective to share is to think about how, you know, as human beings, to have harmony, we have to connect with each other. And connecting isn't easy, real connecting. Connecting authentically requires vulnerability, requires us to open up, to share. And that's difficult, that requires courage, it requires us to live from heart. And there's kind of a perspective, from a psychological perspective, that's really valuable to appreciate, and that is that, you know, as human beings, we are vulnerably born into a vulnerable world. If you think about human beings, we're one of the most vulnerable creatures compared to other animals. You know, they're born, they just get up and walk. Human babies are fragile, we're incredibly fragile. And the world is a very scary place, and we learn quite soon that we can get hurt. We learn not intellectually, we kind of learn intuitively that we can get hurt. People can hurt us. They can hurt us intentionally, they can hurt us unintentionally. And so we kind of develop these ways of protecting ourselves. We develop these defenses, what we call in psychology terminology, defense mechanisms. And it kind of becomes like an automatic software that we start shutting ourselves off more and more from people around us. And the problem with the software is that the software doesn't differentiate between real fear and danger and perceived fear and danger. So what can start to happen is that we start to shut ourselves off all the time, thinking and perceiving that there's danger and fear, where there may not actually be danger and fear. And then what starts to happen is, as human beings, we start to feel a little bit alienated and alone, and like numb, like something's missing.
Now, in your view, have we honestly made effort to address those fears?
Yeah.
And you can also comment on this one. What do you think?
I was wondering, in terms of the fear, like right now we're all in fear of the country being downgraded economically, and people, I'm thinking, you're in fear of being retrenched, for instance.
Right, there's real fear.
Is the state of the economy, the state of how things are, you know, weighing down collectively on our collective psyche?
Right, right. So absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of serious problems that we have in terms of leadership. In some ways, a vacuum in leadership and inauthentic leadership, particularly. And that kind of, you know, on a macro level, that does filter down, and that does affect, you know, because all leadership in some ways is really self-leadership. If you can't lead yourself, you can't hope to lead anyone else. So the question is, as individuals in our society, how much of our own leadership and power are we picking up? It's very seductive to get into like these narratives that there's nothing we can do, and oh, it's so terrible. And yes, there's incredible challenges. But what are we blocking ourselves off from in terms of getting swept up into those narratives? Because the perception creates the reality. We know that now. We know that even from a science perspective, from quantum physics.
While you're there, what do you say to somebody like Ondi in Sandhurst saying, it is difficult not to feel discouraged when things are in shambles like this.
Yeah.
Or maybe somebody like Daniel Singleton in Cape Town saying, "Dear South Africa, this is the time when people should remember that wonderful words called patriotism, rather. Those are the words that need to come to mind." Eric saying, "Well, I blame the ANC for everything that has gone wrong."
Yeah, so, I mean, the blaming I think is happening a lot. I think the blaming is also a defense. So the blaming really is it's far easier for us to, when you blame someone, you're kind of pointing a finger, but there's 3 fingers pointing back at you.
But where does the blame come from? Because surely we say when we in jubilation and a democracy comes into place, there are promises that are made. Right? We make promises, and then 22 years into it, people are looking and are saying, "But where are all these promises? We saw this promise of a better life, saw this promise of maybe getting a job."
It's a promise that's repeatedly
and it's
made
repeated
with
over
every
and over
election
again.
cycle.
There's a falseness that seems to feel like these things are being said, but where's the where's
there is a bit about promise, and there is about just being practical and being real. Realistically, South Africans are struggling. The bread basket is not adding up. If I earn 10,000 Rand and I have 2 kids and I run a household, they need to go to school. I pay most probably 3,000 Rand for school fees. On that 10,000 Rand, I purchase groceries or food. I have to spend about 1,500. Basically what I'm trying to say is it's not adding up. And a general South African is struggling that way. And that is why this bubble, this heat, and this heat has a time frame. There's going to come a point when a hungry man becomes unreasonable.
Well, that's what happened with the fees must fall. I mean, it came to a point where they said, I mean, collectively, and it started like one place to another, or like wildfire. I mean, for all institutions to have people on the streets refusing to pay fees. Now, that's at an institutional level, at a higher education level, and I'm sure you can tell us the psychology of that mob. But that then, I think, can be able to translate to some other institutions and other collective groups who already see it with the strikes and strike action and so on.
And that's the thing. So there's different levels of picking up our power. We can pick up our power as individuals, and it starts there, because what is the society, what is this country? It's really a whole lot of individuals. So there is power that we have as individuals, but then there's the collective power that we can pick up, and the rumblings that start to happen, the anger that starts to build up. It's like a pressure cooker. When people don't feel that their voice is being heard, and that their voice is being invited and listened to, and has any kind of, you can marginalize and squash that voice for a while, but after a while it will start to bubble and boil, and then it will burst. And so, there's a kind of an ecology of energy happening as well.
Speak to us about that, what Case is raising, the psychology behind people rising in angry protest, as opposed to engaging maybe with the political process of voting out the current administration. But they would still leave the current administration there, but instead act out in anger.
Right. So this is something that's, I think we have to be careful of. You see, again, the kind of the outlet in terms of violent expressions of anger is very seductive as well, because it's a catharsis, it's a release, and people are angry, and in some ways people have a right to be angry, but the question is, what do we do with that energy, with that anger? So I want to give you a corporate example. I facilitate workshops for companies, for teams, for organizations, working on culture, developing leaders, creating more open, robust, engaged cultures. And one of the things that I cover sometimes is a scenario where you typically have in organizations hierarchies. You have leadership, and leadership make promises sometimes, and it's easy for the leadership to make their voice heard. It's very hard sometimes for the people on the lower levels to make their voice heard. They feel that sometimes their voice isn't wanted. So it's like almost a microcosm of what happens on the macrocosm. It's a system as well. And so what you often have is the anger that energy that sits in that kind of context, it will leak. It will seek for an outlet. So if that voice is not being given, it may come through unions, it may come through protests. One of the other ways that it comes out and leaks is in kind of the parking areas and in the small pockets where people feel kind of safe with their friends, to kind of demonize the leadership. Oh, so those bosses, they'll never change, there's nothing we can do. And so what happens is that in some ways it's a release and it feels good and it's an outlet, the anger gets kind of released in that way. But the danger is that it creates a narrative of disempowerment. So the narrative that gets created is that, they don't want to hear from us. There's nothing that we can do. We can't change them. And that creates what in psychological terminology is also called a locus of external control, where I believe that my life is only controlled from the outside and I have no agency and nothing that I can do to shift things. And what it also is a waste of energy. So instead of taking that energy and maybe meeting with my friends who are also feeling despondent and not happy with the status quo, and thinking of how can we together position our voice. It's harder to position my voice as a lone, employee, but together, kind of the power and the safety in numbers, it's a lot easier. And there's a way that you can position it.
And maybe when we come back, I want us to talk about what Beth was raising. How do you then make a person believe that there's something that they can do internally, that they possess internal power when they are living below the potential of what could possibly be their situation, and due to no fault of theirs, maybe due to policies that they don't even know where they come from. They probably don't even understand what that policy means. So then how do you tell that person you still have internal power to do something about it? We'll talk about it when we come back. Continue sharing your opinion using the handle @190ed. Post on our Facebook page @DSTV190. The hashtag is #MyOpinion. And of course, we're taking your calls on 083 913 001. 001, yeah, that's the number. 083 913 001. Standard rates apply. Free minutes do not apply. After the break, we dig deeper into this subject. A young South African woman will join us to help us understand what young people today think about the country that they live in. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere.